You are listening to the Unleashed and Aligned podcast, where we strip away the noise, unleash our truth, and align with our highest self. I'm your host, Felicia Dom, certified life coach, Reiki practitioner, and chakra guide, here to help women find deep love and interconnection within themselves. This podcast is here to increase awareness, inspire your journey, and educate you as you reclaim your energy and rise fully into who you are. Check the show notes for links to my healing circle, coaching, and more ways to work with me. Before we begin today's episode, I want to offer a content warning. This conversation contains personal stories and discussions around sexual abuse, sexual trauma, and healing. While it is shared with the intention of empowerment, inspiration, education, and awareness, it may bring up strong emotions or memories for some listeners. Please take care of yourself as you listen. Pause if you need to, come back later, or skip this episode entirely if you feel too activated. Your nervous system always comes first. This podcast is not a substitute for therapy or medical support. If you are currently in a crisis or need immediate help, please reach out to a mental health professional or trauma-informed support line in your area. You are not alone. You are not broken, and your healing matters. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Welcome to the Unleashed and Aligned podcast. This is our August theme, and I have Danelle Gal on here. She supports exquisitely sensitive women in reclaiming their full humanity without the shame of being labeled as quote-unquote broken or quote-unquote disordered. As a trauma-informed somatic coach trained in Existential Kink, she rejects the Western psychological medical model's focus on symptoms and deficits. Instead, Danelle guides women to embrace all parts of themselves as innocent and wise. Her philosophy challenges the notion that intense emotions, sensitivity, or unconventional desire needs to be quote-unquote cured, helping clients discover these as sources of power and magic. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I am so excited, even though it's not an exciting topic, but I just like talking to you. And I know you're going to have so much wisdom to share with the listeners. So in that, our August theme is sexual abuse, sexual assault. I'll let you start wherever you want, but if you could at least give us some context to your story and maybe how it began and some of the things that you went through.
Yes. Okay. It's such a good place to start asking about like the background, because from my experience years ago, when I did go, and I've been through multiple counts of sexual assault in a couple of different ways. When I went through the things that I went through, I was unable to talk about it at the time. And I'll get into this in a second, but I think it's so important. And I just want to encourage women listening to this to start to tell your story. It doesn't have to be like you're telling the world or you're telling people that you don't trust or feel like supported from or safe with. But when I started to tell my story, which was about, 7 years after things happened, it unraveled this layer of me and my healing that I wasn't able to connect with. And it's been one of the most profound, when I say quote unquote modalities, it's been one of the most important modalities, literally just yapping about what I've been through, seeking practitioners, seeking people that I could trust to talk to just let it out of my body, because so much shame can build up when it comes to sexual assault. So just for some context, and of course, trigger warning, I think is implicit to this podcast anyway. But in college, I was raped. And in college, I had 2 years of college, and then I transferred because I couldn't bear to be on campus with my abuser anymore. But in those 2 years that happened, that was like the final thing that happened that finally got me to leave. But then prior to that, there were a couple of counts of sexual assault from like guy friends. And so it had been like building over time. And I just remember like feeling like like something broke inside of me. And after the final assault that occurred over those couple of years, I remember like feeling this emptiness and going back to my dorm and just like showering and feeling like I wasn't able to get clean. And I really didn't know like anything about the effects of this kind of trauma and boundary crossing. It was a somatic experience for me to feel like I can't get clean. Like I didn't know why that was happening. And then to my surprise, I guess I could say, I just didn't tell anyone about it. I think my roommate, I loosely told about it, but then I didn't tell anyone. And it was only years later that I learned that, wow, I had so much shame from that experience. I thought it was my fault. And anyone who I reached out to, if I didn't tell anyone, I don't like 100% mean that. I went to a counselor or some kind of school faculty person who I thought I should go to. And she basically said, if you bring this forward, if you like create a case against him, like a legal case, you might ruin his life. And that reaction just shut me down. And I was just talking to one of my favorite mentors, David Bedrick, who I just interviewed on my podcast. And he is all about shame. He works with shame. And I've learned from him over the last couple of years that the witnesses to the initial trauma, let's call it, are in a way even more important than like the pain caused from the perpetrator, from the initial thing, which of course we can't really compare those two things, but it's like that person caused the hurt. But then the witness of the pain is the thing that can really like solidify and freeze trauma in place. And that's what happened with me without me even really knowing anything about what you go through, what your body and mind goes through after experiencing something like that. When she was like, you might ruin his life, I just shut down. That was it. Never telling anyone again.
Yeah.
As like an empathetic, sensitive person, as many people I'm sure who are like listening to this are, I didn't want to hurt anyone. Like the whole
Yeah.
thing is that I had been hurt, but I don't want to perpetuate the hurt. And so that was really like the perfect thing for that person to say for me to just shut down for like almost a decade. So I'll just pause there and see if you have any questions.
Yeah. So, for one, thank you so much for speaking on your story and saying it in the way that you worded all that. I know that it's going to resonate with people because you said it so perfectly. I didn't have the exact same experience, but I understand so many things that you're saying. And one of the things that I loved is that you said to speak up about your story. I think that is so important, and so many times, myself included, we get caught up in the shame and caught up in what maybe somebody might say to us to shut us down, or what people might think about us. They might
Yeah.
think differently of us, and so we don't wanna share, especially if it's something within a family, an uncle or a friend or somebody close to a family. A lot of times we don't wanna talk about that for fear of what others, if they even would believe us or how they would feel going forward, how they feel around us. And so I think that while you can't predict what anybody else is going to think about you or how they're going to respond, it is so important for you to get that out because it is a part of the releasing of the trauma. And so
Yeah.
I'm so happy that you touched on that in the first place. And I think so many of us experience shame within either what did I do? Somehow it was my fault. Is it something I said, how I dressed, the way I acted? We put it back on ourselves. And also, there's a part, and I'm not trying to speak for everybody, but I think that a large majority of us have a part of us that feels more shame about the fact that we allowed it to happen to us.
Yeah.
And that is very hard to rectify or to forgive or to acknowledge in some cases. And the last thing that you touched on, which is the witnesses, I think that you hit the nail on the head with. It is really important on who you seek out to tell in the first place, because how they respond, that first initial person that responds can really shut you down and can make you feel like either if they think that you're lying because they like the person, or they have an experience with the person, they're like, they would never do that. Or in your case, this person is, oh, you might ruin somebody's life. But society will say those things. And also, if you're talking to somebody that had an experience themselves and has deep shame or regret, or maybe had been told themselves that they ruined somebody's life, they could unintentionally give you bad advice or say something because of what they experienced and the shame that they still carry because they haven't allowed that to release.
I love all of what you just said. And like one thing that stands out to me is I think that something that's like important as we're having this conversation is to understand like we really can't control other people. So we, even if we're like, oh, yes, that like this person might be a good person to tell my trauma to. And then we're so hyper vigilant when we've had trauma. And trauma isn't what happened, it's how we react to what happened, which is why we really can't ever compare traumas with other people. Our nervous system reacted. What kind of stayed stuck? What was able to process and move? What's our experience after the trauma, right after, month after, years after? Does it stick? Do we have dreams? Do we have triggers? Like it's all different. And then some people don't hold trauma from similar experience that we would objectively say is a similar experience. And so it's all about your nervous system. And coming back to the unshaming thing, if your nervous system reacts with trauma and it holds on to the trauma, it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. I actually think about it, and we want to thank your nervous system for being so active and so protective over you. That's actually a really highly functioning nervous system. It doesn't mean there's something wrong or like you're more sensitive and more weak. I think, quote unquote, sensitive and weak. Like we have these old, like stale labels that we put on how we react to the world, and especially like women who are attuned and sensitive, which is like who I work with coaching. There can just be this experience of there must be something wrong with me if I have all this trauma and it wasn't even something like bad that happened. Like we have this weird thing where we compare traumas. We're like, I should be over it. Like other people are suffering so much more. I should just be able to move on and be over it. But then 10 years later, they're still experiencing symptoms. So I think like circling back around to the telling other people and having a witness who is not going to instill shame or transmit it to you from their own projections of like their own shit, it's nothing to do with you, is what I found is, yes, that initial person did transmit some kind of story that she had about guilt and whose fault it was. And I'm sure it was not her intention to shame me, but she was just coming from the lens that she comes from. So I can't blame her at all. And I don't. But I think it's really important to say here that this is why there's a necessity in continuing to tell your story and simultaneously doing this unshaming work for yourself. Because unfortunately, no one can heal your trauma like for you because no one lives inside of your body, inside of your nervous system. So I think it's like super important to start to just like the word education is coming up, educate yourself. And I know it can be so hard because it's like, why should I have to do this extra work? I know I didn't ask for this. I didn't want this to happen. But like the nervous system working with a practitioner who understands how to co-regulate with you, which really just means they stay completely calm and relaxed in their nervous system. So they're not transmitting shame or they're not punishing you in any subtle or blatant way as you're telling your story. They can just hold it and they can receive it, but not take it on as their own. So they're not projecting out back towards you. I think it really is about finding, and there's so many people, like so many practitioners out there, myself included, where you can come who are trauma informed and maybe do somatic work, nervous system work, therapist, somatic coach, whatever it is. an unshaming teacher like David Bedrick, people in that arena who you can start to just learn from so that you don't have to grip onto that trauma for so many years alone. Like the experience of being isolated and after a trauma like that is so intense. And I just want to say for like anyone listening who's been through sexual assault, like I understand like how painful it is to just hold that yourself and think you have to hold it yourself. And yeah, you shouldn't have been at X place at X time. And like you shouldn't have been wearing what you're wearing and you shouldn't have been hanging out with those people and you shouldn't have been doing the things you have been like. It's so much easier, I think, to self blame than to really see objectively this happened. It caused me so much hurt. That hurt is real and that hurt needs to be regarded. It needs to be observed. It needs to be witnessed in a really loving way, whether that's from me, other people, both, hopefully both. But keep telling your story. And in the meantime, learn nervous system tools to start to process. There's a really good tool called havening that's super simple. You can look it up online. You like rub from your shoulders down your arms, then do like a hand washing motion. You can rub your face as you're just recounting what happened to you in the long run on sentence because your breath gets longer. So when your breath gets longer, stress levels reduce just slightly. And trauma happens because we're in such a stress state, like our body is in such fight, flight, freeze, fawn that we can't process the experience. So it just like clings to our nervous system. And until we can bring the stress down as we're reliving and recounting what happened, we're not going to be able to process it. So that stress threshold is so important to learn those tools to just bring it down a little bit. Doesn't have to be like a huge amount, but just a little bit so that you can start to digest and metabolize what happens. You can work through it and let it go. I'll pause there.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. You gave such an amazing tool for everybody out there that is maybe experiencing something right now
Yeah.
and doesn't know what the first steps are. And of
Yeah.
course, reaching out to somebody like yourself or another coach or therapist that is able to hold that space, like you said. But in that, if you're looking for something right now that you can do in that meantime, or if you're not that comfortable yet, I think it's
Yeah.
such an easy practice that you can just start right now and work your way to. I think when you first start it too, depending on where your trauma level's at, it might be you might want to just do a little bit at a time, right? You're not going to be like full on because you might have some bad triggers reliving something, but just like slowly getting into the work of that. I think that's such a great tool and practice that you had mentioned. And I did want to ask you a question. As a trauma informed somatic coach, how do you see the body carrying stories of trauma, especially after sexual trauma,
Yeah.
even when your mind is like trying to move on from it?
Yeah. Such a good question. So it's a really interesting question because when I think of the body and somatic work that I do, that's not actually the most precise way to talk about it. And I'll explain why. So the body is the unconscious mind, right? So we have conscious mind, and that's the mind that's going to analyze and try to solve. And it's just going to think in circles. And it's going to be like, I must have done something bad or wrong, or they're the worst and fuck them. And it just goes in circles. But it doesn't actually have the capability or the capacity in many states, especially like a fight, flight, freeze state, to solve. But it tries because that's like how we can think we have control is like our logic brain just comes in and it just spins us and spins us. And yet the body is the unconscious mind. And what I mean by that is the unconscious mind speaks in sensation. And so unconscious mind is connected to beliefs that you have developed when you were really young. So I think of the first experiences of strong negative emotions like embarrassment, like feeling judged, like being rejected, things like that. It's our first memory. And sometimes it's like, we don't even consciously know what that is. And like in the coaching that I do with people, like we can often find that core memory. And sometimes it's really surprising because it's often not something that we would think with our logic mind was like a quote unquote big deal. But it's like just something happened when you were young. Someone said something to you. Someone walked away from you. Something happened in a split reaction. Your brain developed a thought. You made it mean something about you and like your worth and who you are. I'm not enough. They must hate me, whatever it is. And then because that first experience was so painful, and for a child, like those experiences are everything. Like when we're an adult, we can parse out a bit, we can compare experiences with ourselves, but when we're young, something that might seem small to us as an adult, like observing our child self, was everything. Like that example of someone walking away from you, it's everything. And it just imprints into us. So it's a thought or a belief that formed at that like precise time. You're probably not conscious of it at the time, but it just felt like such a truth. That person hates me, right? I'm not good enough. And then in the background of your mind, in your unconscious mind, you just hold a belief of I'm not enough. Again, not conscious, but this unconscious belief of I'm not enough shows up in so many ways in your life that, again, you're not even consciously aware of. So, for example, not applying to a job that you think might be a good fit, but you're like, oh no, there's so many other applicants that are probably like better than me and have more experience. It's like we don't even think that's necessarily coming from a belief of not being enough, but it could. And so we have all of these like ways that we are in the world. It becomes the lens in which we view the world, these beliefs that we developed super early on that come out of shame. And those beliefs, it's like a metaphor in a way to say these things are stored in the body because it's in the nervous system, right? It's just again a lens in which we view the world, and these beliefs now come up in sensation. So they come through like a twisting feeling in the stomach when you're about to give a presentation. But the belief is, I'm not enough. People are going to hate me, right? We're not consciously thinking that, but our body is like gripping and bracing like this is unsafe. And it comes up in so many ways. It's like heart pounding, sweating, twisted stomach. There can be all kinds of autoimmune diseases that can come forth from like these deep unconscious beliefs that we have. And so when it comes to carrying stories of trauma in the body, that's what I think about when we have this like shame or this belief that we're somehow bad, wrong, broken, stupid, ugly, we need to be fixed, no one loves us. We like carry these around like in our unconscious corridors of our minds, and it becomes part of our bodily, somatic, sensation based emotional experience. And so it's like, oftentimes we do this thing where we're like, I feel sad, but I don't really have a reason to feel sad. And so that's because your logical mind hasn't cracked the case. And now it thinks, I shouldn't be sad. I have no reason to be sad. Is there something wrong with me? Am I depressed? Versus like tuning into the layers of you that exist beyond that like conscious kind of fix it logical brain mentality, and you move into the wisdom of the body. And how we do that is we can do things like hypnosis, we can do meditation that can bring the stress level down just to activate like different brain wave states, and then the sensations can come up, then the emotions can come up. And then we can like usually always find some kind of a reason for you feeling any type of way at any time. Like it's pretty amazing. There's always a reason, but your conscious mind like just can't put it together because it's not working on that unconscious level.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. That such good information and articulated so perfectly. Like I understand this work, but I'm like always trying to look at in the lens of the listener. And I was
Yeah.
like, that was said so beautifully. So thank you for that. And I I love how you mentioned when we're feeling a certain way, there's always some kind of unconscious, because I've had that happen so many times where I'm like, I don't know why I feel like upset or depressed or what's wrong with me. Is
Yeah.
there something in the energy? Like, where's the planets at? I'm like,
Exactly.
it's like I'm trying to find this a reason that's logical.
Yes, I know we try to grasp onto anything. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think astrology and horoscopes and stuff like that. I saw like I think it can be very seductive to go into like astrology and any system, human design, Enneagram, like all of these systems that give us some kind of feeling that we're in control or there's a reason or there's some kind of clarity and precision. And I think that's all great to a certain extent. And I remember I saw this meme that was like, what planets are making me feel sad? And the answer was like Earth. But yeah. And the thing about somatic work and like doing this kind of stuff and like implementing these kinds of practices where you are connecting with your unconscious is there does become less of a sort of relying on or falling back on those kinds of systems. And don't get me wrong, I love like divination tools. I think they connect to our unconscious. Like we literally pick up, that's my view about like horoscopes and tarot and all of that is like when we see something written or whatever, we're literally just connecting to the parts that stand out to us on an unconscious level. So we literally do get clarity, like when we dive into those kinds of systems. And they work because, like, we're unconsciously connecting and creating clarity with the parts that resonate with us. But yeah, this kind of somatic work, like when you do practice it and just make a habit out of going into yourself and learning how to do that and learning how to connect with the unconscious and really popping the lid off of rationality. I think this is important. The logic mind is so connected to rationality. What's rational? What makes sense? And that's the only reality. But the unconscious works in, again, sensations, symbols, shapes, color, sound. It has a complete language of its own. And when we start to connect with the parts of us that can just make sounds and like movements representing our pain, it starts to just uncork some of the pressure that has built over time and like keeping things in or trying to look outside of ourselves for answers. And we start to actually be in this flow of expression and we heal. Like, to me, this is how we heal, is like we express ourselves and we let ourselves express in completely feral, like unhinged ways, the ways that our bodies want us to express. It's completely not like societally acceptable. But you want to do these things in spaces, again, where you can be alone or be with like a supportive witness, an unshaming witness. So you can move through these layers because on top of the trauma, we have so much shame about, like you said, it's what do people think of me? Like the judgment is so big. So then we never let these parts that's out that like just want to be seen and heard and express themselves.
One thing that caught me and I wanted to mention is when you said that the unconscious really doesn't work in the same like logical sense. And I'm trying to remember what it's called. There's past life regression and then there's this other one. It's like the same as past life, but you're not going in a past life. You're just whatever comes up just comes up. I
Yeah.
think it's like you're supposed to be going, you could go maybe into quote unquote heaven or like another space. It's
Mhm.
something like that, and I can't think of the name, but it's basically kinda like a past life. You're just not going
Yeah.
to past life. And we did a practice because this lady she had to do this in order to pass her certification, and so I was the person. And I had told her it's really hard for me to get put under. I've had problems with that before, so she's like, "Let's do 2 practice ones so you can get used to my voice and we can see how it goes." And the first one, I'm so happy we did this because the first one my logical brain kept trying to kick in because you're not really under. I think a lot of people think if you're doing a
Yeah.
hypnosis session or something, you're not going to be consciously aware, but you really
Yeah.
are.
You are.
Yeah. And so I kept on being like, this isn't right. And that doesn't make any sense. And it was really hard. And then the
Yeah.
second time she had mentioned, like, you need to let that go. And so the second time it was like deep and it was really good. And then the third time, I just let it go. Whatever came up, I didn't even hesitate. And I think that's so powerful to shed that layer because when I shed, like each session, I shed a new layer of me not believing myself.
Yeah.
And there was so much, like the second session, I had really good wisdom. But then the third session, I was like, wow, this was really profound. Like what all came up
Yeah.
because I let that go. And to your point of it doesn't make sense, and I think it's the same when we're connecting with, like, maybe our more psychic self or our spirituality or any of that stuff. It's like a lot of that stuff doesn't really make sense,
Yeah.
but and I think that's what blocks us from really fully developing those skills is
Yes.
because we're like, "This my intuition says don't trust this person, but everybody says that they're nice, and, like, why would I not?" And that's, like, the first stage of you not trusting in yourself and starting to go against what you already feel within your body.
That's so real. I love that story. Yeah, I think about as you were talking, I was thinking about like childlike openness, where, children are not like judging their experience. Like, is this logical? Does this make sense or not? They're just like, oh, there are fairies in the garden. And
Yeah.
they're just experiencing reality as it is. And I think when we're children, our unconscious and conscious minds are just like one and the same. Like we haven't divided them yet. And so we're just experiencing all of it without shame, without judgment, without societal stories of this
Mhm.
thing, this doesn't, this is good, this is wrong. We're just experiencing it. And I think there really is something to, and it makes sense that it took a couple sessions to kind of get you in that place of trust because we've our logic, literally the job of our logical brain is to keep us safe. The unconscious mind is full of just murky, weird ass shit that we think we might get in trouble for it, like intrusive thoughts or yeah, inappropriate things. Our logical brain is like, wow, that's so inappropriate. Like it's just full of everything,
Yeah.
the taboo shit, all that shadow stuff that we're just taught to oppress and suppress. And so even contacting that part of you and being able to observe that part of you and letting the logic mind take a back seat, it can take a while because that logic mind is so gripping. Like it so wants to protect you from whatever's down there because you've spent your whole life probably building like ways to mask the intrusive thoughts and the shadow stuff. And
Yes.
it's like, you shouldn't think that. You should feel ashamed. Things you got punished for when you're young, we learn to just bury. So when we contact the unconscious mind, we can have a lot of fear come up or like what even is there because it's often really surprising like to our conscious selves like what is even there. Yeah, I've had like stuff come up for me that I'm like, wow, Danelle, that's pretty crazy. But that's what it is. The unconscious mind is not operating on conscious level reality. It is operating in symbols. So if something comes up around, I want to kill that person or do something terrible, it doesn't mean literally. It is operating under the symbolic representation of what it would mean to end something, right? In terms of death and things like that. And when we form a relationship to our unconscious mind that's more observant and reverent for its symbolic wisdom, then our conscious mind, I think, starts to soften the fear a bit. And it's like you give yourself an allowance for those things to come up and you just start to become a witness to them.
Yeah. You mentioned it. It does soften. Like you said, we suppress so much and especially if you're really trying to push away something, your logical brain almost can feel like it's on overdrive because you're
Yeah.
not trying to get into your body. And so when you start really paying attention to those unconscious thoughts, being that observer, it really does soften. I love that word that you used.
I do have one more thing I wanted to say to bring it back around to something you said before, which was around you said something about, yeah, we were talking about not controlling other people and like their reactions. We can't like expect people to be that unshaming witness for us. We just have to keep telling our story and do the work ourselves simultaneously. But there's something here about the unconscious and like triggers, right? I think we can do this thing. And this is why I think it's really important for every practitioner to be trauma informed, even if they don't specifically work with trauma. And it doesn't have to be like a crazy, you don't have to take like a 3-year course to be trauma informed. It's just like a couple of basic ways to relate to people and like what they're experiencing. And I think about how it's really important to come to a place inside of yourself where you're no longer scared of being triggered, which is quite meta.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like when you work with your unconscious mind in these ways that we've been talking about, what starts to happen is you build a bridge between your unconscious and conscious mind. Whereas before, there was so much fear in the way of that connection, because really fear is like being scared of ourselves, like what we're going to feel, how we're going to respond, especially how we're going to feel. That's like a huge one. So we
Yeah.
like avoid. And it just creates this severed relationship between like our deepest wells of our inner self and then our conscious existence. And our conscious existence, we can be anxious, we can be depressed, we can have all of these experiences that don't feel pleasant. It's because we're just so scared of looking into ourselves and seeing what's there. And so I think it's really important to start to develop a relationship to your triggers that's not one of fear. Like fear is like the thing to fear itself, right? That
Mhm.
quote. But like when you start to realize that like nothing that can come up inside of you like will surprise you anymore,
Yeah.
that you contain a multiverse. You contain everything that you think is like bad in other humans outside of you is inside of you too. You
Mhm.
start to do this true unshaming work where you realize I'm not separate from anyone. If I'm judging people for being bad and wrong, it's only me judging myself for the parts of me that I feel like are bad and wrong. And it's not that justice doesn't matter. Like, we want to, on the surface, be like fighting for what's right and like for justice. And this is something David Bedrick and I talked about that really stuck with me. But on that individual level, when you're relating to yourself, like you want to develop a relationship to yourself that is essentially loving, in the sense of I can be with whatever's here. I don't have to run away from it. I can if I want to. Like, that's fine too. I'm not going to judge myself for that. But I can be with what's here because I have the capacity and capability to be with whatever emotions are here, whatever unconscious stuff comes up. I'm not scared of myself. And I think that is ultimately that self-trust. Your
Mhm.
trauma, that trust can be so broken. And that's like what we're trying to rebuild in trauma work.
Yeah, tailoring off that. When you first started trying to build that new trust within yourself, were you in the coaching space at that time, or what did that look like? Like, how did you even start to build that within you?
Yeah, it's such a good question. So I reached a point, I moved back home after I dropped out of school, after all those traumatic things occurred or after I experienced trauma. And I moved home and it was like the lowest of the low. It was like I just felt so broken. I felt so numb. I felt so broken. I did not know where to go from there. I also didn't want to tell people what happened. So I was just stuck in my glass case of emotion. And I moved home and I didn't even tell my mom what happened or my dad. And yeah, it was just a really isolating, intense experience. And I think about this moment a lot because it was at once one of the hardest moments of my life, but also it just it pulled some, I don't know if I want to call it strength or power, but there was something inside of me where I had, and trigger warning again, but I was really suicidal. And I came up against this moment where I felt like I had to make a choice. I was like, I can literally kill myself, or I can just start to, I can move in any direction because I can't get further down.
Yeah.
I have nothing more to lose. I was like, I can just try a little. I don't know what that looks like, but I just remember there's a very specific moment. I was like, I went on a run and I was like on a dock. And yeah, I was like, I need to make a decision because I was feeling like I was in this liminal space of just like suffering relentlessly and not telling anyone about it. And I was like, I don't know what to do. And just something inside of me was like, make a decision. And in that moment, I decided to keep going because I was mostly just curious about what would happen if I kept going. And I went through a lot of, at the time, I was like running a lot. That was my trauma therapy. Like
Yeah.
I would just run and run and I would work. I had a couple of jobs. I was like living with my mom at home and all my friends were at college. And so it was like, wow, my life sucks. But yeah, I was just running and then I would meditate and I would do these. It's so crazy to think about this because this truly was the foundation for my career and life now. I would have never known that back then. I just thought I was suffering and things were terrible. But like I would do these really long meditations where I would just sit with myself for hours. I like don't do that now at all, but just hours, like 3 hours. So I would go to work, I would run, and then I would sit in meditation and I would just repeat every single day once I decided, let's see what happens if I keep going. And in those meditations, I experienced like such psychedelic, like, how do I even explain this? I would literally like travel to other worlds in my mind. I would see myself as different characters. I would see past lives and like a very visual person. I went on these like crazy experiences. And then sometimes I would sit in meditation. I would become like a mountain, just like eternally still. I just had all of these experiences of living like different ways of being, like orientations toward life and different people and different things. And it just, it was so fascinating to me that I could access that and a level of my like imagination and unconscious mind. It was just a whole world in there. And that was like the catalyst for starting to get more into like health and like healing modalities. I started to dip my toe in exploring like yoga and I did like fasting and stuff, which was actually like really crazy. Yeah, I just started to do these like spiritual modalities and health things. And I got off my medication, which do not recommend. I did it cold turkey, and that was like not a good idea,
Wow.
but that's what I did. So I got off my Adderall, and that really brought me to a low place. But it was like I felt this fire inside of me. I went on a run one day. This is the last thing I'll say about this before I pause. I went on a run one day and I was just like screaming. And I remember there would be sometimes where cars would drive by and they'd be like, "Are you okay?" And I would just be curled in fetal position because that was my therapy. I would just run through the woods and I would scream and I would shake. It was before I knew anything about quote unquote somatic therapy that I do now, but I was doing a natural version of that because the
Yeah.
pain was so intense. I like didn't know what to do with it. And I feel like I could tell anyone about it. I remember there was one day where I was running and I just had this thought that if I give up, he wins or they win, the men who have caused this pain. I I don't want them to win. I don't know. Maybe I was competitive. I don't know what it was. So I just spit everywhere. But I was like, yeah, I just, for some reason, that like stoked some kind of fire inside of me. And I still believe that. I'm like, you need to rise above it. I know it's so hard, but it's also the most profound experience. There's an invitation here to deepen your connection to yourself and in turn to the world.
Yeah.
I'm happier than I've ever been now. I'm so much more present and stable. I used to have all these mental health diagnoses. I don't know if I qualify for any of those anymore. I don't know, like whatever, but I've gone through the ringer and I've come out of it so much better. And if I could tell my younger self that, she wouldn't believe it probably, but keep going.
Oh my gosh. I feel like there's something about, and I think it's with a lot of different modalities of exercise, but I feel like there's something about running that if you're in either a depression or feeling in a sadness or a certain state, just keep running. The first initial will be hard, but once you break a certain mileage point, it's like all of that emotion comes out.
Yeah.
And sometimes I don't even know I'm sad and or upset, and I'm
Yeah.
like, "Whoa, where is this
Yeah.
coming from?" It's like its own therapy. So I love that
Yes.
you were a
Oh
runner.
my God. I have something that I think is really important to say about running is so I've done a little bit of EMDR therapy, not myself, like I don't do it with clients, although I am going to get certified at some point as a somatic EMDR counselor, but not yet. But I've done it with a therapist. EMDR is eye movement
Ah,
desensitization reprocessing. So yeah, I'll describe a little bit like what it's about for people who don't know, but it's basically it's our sort of standard Western trauma reprocessing therapy. It's one of the most standard ones that's been like really studied heavily and is a very mainstream trauma reprocessing therapy. And it's a somatic therapy. So there's like a couple ways to do it. Like the therapist can like literally put their finger side to side, and you can follow their finger as you're recounting your trauma. Or you can do like butterfly tapping, which is just hugging yourself, and like bilateral stimulation, just tapping your arms side to side as you're recounting it. That's the one I like because I get like confused. I feel like my brain goes blank when I try to do my eyes side to side, but it's the same thing essentially. And the woman who invented EMDR, this is an amazing story. She was feeling really shitty. Maybe she got into a fight. I forget what actually happened, but she was feeling really shitty, like emotionally shitty. And she went on a long walk. And by the end of the walk, she was like, I feel so much better. What just happened in between the beginning of the walk and the end of the walk? And she started to study walking and forward movement and trauma, and if there's correlation with healing. And what she discovered is that when you're walking slash running slash, I think swimming can do it too, and biking, forward movement, extra, but you have to be exercising. You can't be driving. You need to be moving your body and like moving in space. And when we're running, let's take that example, our eyes are darting side to side and all around because we're looking at stuff. Like the way light hits different objects is just natural. It's what we do when we're outside. And when we do that, it releases hormones that are similar to our REM sleep state, which is rapid eye movement, which is a deep sleep state that's slightly dissociative, meaning you're like dreaming, but you're not feeling emotions as you're dreaming. There are certain sleep states where we like feel everything, and
Yeah.
it's so crazy to have that experience. But then REM sleep is we can still be dreaming, but we're not like feeling the intensity of the emotions that could be in other states. So I think about psychedelic therapy like ketamine, which puts you in that slightly disassociative state. So it can be really like beneficial for trauma because like we reduce the stress response, like I talked about before. You're slightly disassociated from the emotional experience, then you can metabolize it, you can process it. And so EMDR and running and walking, you're literally putting your brain in a different brainwave state into REM, into a similar state. And it allows you to process emotion. So like what you're talking about when you like run, you're like, I didn't even know I was feeling sad, but like sadness is coming up. It's literally tapping you into emotional experiences that you aren't really able to access when you're not in that brain state. And you're literally able to process real trauma, process real emotions on a really profound level. So, like, the actual science behind it is so real. That's what it is. It's so therapeutic.
Oh my gosh. I love the knowledge that you've had behind that because that makes total sense. I'm like, I know that something's going on.
Yeah,
I just
something.
thought it was like an overstimulated, like body, immune system, whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had a friend that also is a runner, and she's all of actually people that I know that run have said similar things. So it's cool. Now I can give them some of that
Yeah.
information.
Yeah.
And I love that you mentioned like the eye movement because I have a husky puppy, so I'm constantly like looking for rabbits and stuff. So I probably do it a lot more, but that really resonated as well.
Hilarious. Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. Like nature, that forward moving thing, and like being in nature and looking at how the light is hitting things just unconsciously. And the fact that like we can process trauma doing that is just so crazy. It's so profound. It makes sense, but it's like amazing.
Can you share how practices like existential kink that you are certified in or somatic work help
Yeah.
you when you're working towards healing and how they can empower other women to reclaim that like voice and that power for themselves?
You ask such good questions. This is just like perfect because this is something I wanted to talk about, but haven't yet. And it's about pleasure. Like, when I think about trauma and the various responses we have in a traumatized state, constriction, contraction, tension, fear, literally our muscles tense, blood is routed from our midline, like digestive system, to our arms and our legs so that we can run away from threat or be propelled towards a threat in fight response, or fawn, just flop down to the ground and play dead, or freeze. So our body is like setting itself up to tense, tighten, constrict, route the blood into certain places so that we can react in action and get away. And when we have trauma and we're holding trauma in the body, in the unconscious mind, like wherever it is, there's an experience of just baseline stress and tension, right? And that stress and tension like goes up or down based on circumstance, based on what you're thinking and feeling and what's going on. But with trauma, there's just, I think of it as like a tight like cord where it's just when it gets touched, which is triggered when I think about this image, when it gets touched, it gets activated and it just tightens more, right? And then we have a response, we freak out or we shut down or whatever when we get triggered. So existential kink is a philosophy and practice created by Dr. Carolyn Lovewell, formerly known as Carolyn Elliott. That's like what her name is like in her books and stuff. So if you look her up, it's a practice that's based on like tantric and Buddhist philosophy that is essentially learning how to alchemize pain to pleasure. And so when I think of pain and I think of trauma and I think of stress, it's all one and the same. It's tension, constriction, and it comes out like in interpersonal relationships as like lack of trust and like lack of safety. So there are like so many levels to like that kind of pain and constriction. And it keeps us disconnected from ourselves. It keeps us closed, right? It's a whole experience. And so the thing about sexual trauma and like sexual assault is that there are so many facets of the shame that it can induce in us and the pain that it can induce in us, because women's sexuality, anything to do with women and their bodies and sex, is so insidiously taboo in our culture. It still is. It's a thread that runs through everything. And that's one reason that we can feel so dirty or so traumatized after something like that happens. Their bodies, it's like the boundary gets crossed, the physical boundary gets crossed. And it can be so intense for so many reasons, with the shame on top of it of, oh, I can't talk about this, or I must have dressed a certain way, or it must have been my fault in some way. So it's like the shame turns back around to us and into ourselves. The antidote to tension, tightness, pain, all of the effects of trauma and sexual assault is pleasure. And the thing that sexual assault does often is it completely disconnects us from our pleasure, because we think, oh, sex tied in with sensations, tied in with how taboo it is to even claim my sexuality for myself as a woman, tied in with this trauma, tied in with this tension and this kind of resistance to even letting myself go there. It's all wrapped in one thing, like sex, pain, taboo, assault, boundary cross. It's like the wires in our brain just like cross. And it's, I can't be touched. I can't even touch myself. It's too triggering. Like it just becomes, we build this wall between ourselves and our pleasure. And this is not just sexual, it goes for everything. It's like we start to shut down circuits of pleasure in like other ways. Like we stop doing things we once loved and made us feel good, and like depression can creep in, and we just start to sever circuits of pleasure. And so existential kink, the practice, when we talk about sensations in the unconscious mind, it's really sitting with and being with. And you want to do this like with a practitioner, but you can read the book and go through it yourself. But you don't want to start with your biggest trauma. That is like way later. Like with existential kink, you want to start with really small things. Oh, my partner said something that like annoyed me, right? And then feeling, what is the sensation in my body, or the sensations that I experience from that? Where does it live? Maybe it's like a little shimmery sensation in my stomach. And then we start to almost like, yeah, we feel into that sensation in the stomach. And then I might prompt and say, okay, let that sensation get like a little bit bigger. What happens when we turn up the dial 1 to 2%? Can you be with the sensation without trying to change it, fix it, run away from it? We go very slowly through it. And if it's no, I can't, okay, what other parts are coming in trying to protect you? And we go through that, right? It's a very slow process, but eventually what happens, and this gets wired into your system as you practice existential kink, eventually what happens is you can pretty immediately turn feelings like from that annoyed emotion, like that glitter in the stomach or sensation in the stomach, you can perceive it from a different angle where it's, oh, it feels good to have that little shimmer in my stomach. Can I just let myself have that? And then when we let ourselves have it and we connect with it feeling good and pleasurable, it can make us laugh. It can like elicit glowy feelings in our body. There's an openness, which is the complete opposite of the tense, tight, traumatized body. There's an opening, there's an openness. And in that openness, it just gets to release. Like whatever the irritation was, whatever you were holding onto and gripping onto so tight, it just gets to release. And it's a total somatic experience. It's like nothing changed circumstantially, but like we have that power. And I think that's super important as women, especially with like sexual assault. Like this has been a game changer for me to also call back to not being afraid to your triggers thing that I was saying before. It's there is gold and there is actual pleasure inside of your triggers if you are willing to learn the skill of alchemizing your sensations and emotions. Like it is a wild ride. Being a human is a wild ride. And like I have so much fodder for doing existential kink with because I feel emotions very strongly and I have those past traumas and stuff. I have a lot of stuff to work with and it actually makes me feel happy. Like it's a weird transition I've made that I never maybe would have ever realized. But I'm like, oh, joy is my motherfucking birthright. And like I can transmute and literally alchemize my pain into pleasure. That is amazing that we can do that.
Yes, I had never heard of existential kink until I met you. And while I don't like practice it fully, I feel like following you, going to your workshops, listening to what you have to say, it really helped me realize that because I profoundly love what you post and what you speak on. And even within your bio, it's really there's no cure. There's nothing to fix. You're like perfectly imperfect is what I get from a lot of your work. And it's made me realize how much I haven't accepted that within myself and working
Yeah.
towards accepting that. And one of the things that I love to do now is if I feel like either I was out of line with somebody or I did something that I was like, why did you do that? Or maybe I didn't do as much as I should have. I try to work on like a radical acceptance and being my best friend and loving every part, even the disorganized, sometimes parts of me that maybe are rude or have like very small fuses and while also paying attention to like why did I have that reaction and where am I going from here? But I feel like I'm not working with you directly, but even watching your posts, listening to your podcast, just being in your like vicinity and what you have to speak on, I feel like I've profoundly changed the way I view myself. And I think that is so important because if you can do that, that even like coaching me, I'm like the amazing things that you do for people. It's just the way you speak now. I know you're resonating with people and people are going to get something out of this that they didn't before in any of my other episodes, right? It's like you have so much wisdom and so much amazing things to share. And I'm just like so excited that you're speaking on this particular month's topic because it's a difficult one and it is something that people don't want to talk about. And I think that what you're bringing to this month's theme is something that people really, I want to say need to hear, although I hate saying need. I don't like using that word, but I think it's something that if you're listening and you have this type of trauma, I think that I know that you're going to get so much out of the practices that Danelle is talking about right now. And just, I'm just like, so, I'm super excited. I'm like fangirling right now.
I roll over you too, girl. I'm like so happy. Yeah, it's like music to my ears to hear that even without paying me a dime or working with me, you're getting profound things from like this work. That's my goal. Like, of course, working one to one is like a different experience and level, but this stuff should not be gate kept. Like,
Right.
it's so important. Yeah, if I can help people so profoundly, and these are like the coaches and the people that like I just really appreciate and love, they're the same way, like so generous with their work. They're not trying to keep it only for people who could pay for stuff. Like, I think that's so important. And the last thing I'll say is, yeah, what you're just talking about really made me think about rewriting the rules that you have for yourself. We all have these unconscious, I think of it literally in my mind as like a book or like a scroll. We have all these rules we've written for ourselves that we're not even conscious that we're holding inside of ourselves. And it dictates our life about what we can talk about and not talk about what we can express and not express. We also have a lot of stories, and I'm still like working with myself. It's an ongoing process. There's never like a full 100% healed, like perfect human. It doesn't exist. I think that's important, that there is no cure to being a human if you're a human. Like, you're having a human experience. That's like the fun and the horror of it.
Yeah.
But like the rules that like we have for ourselves about what we can and can't talk about and who we are and like all of these ways we identify ourselves and all the judgments we have. I think about how I found a lot of healing in understanding that rules are just made up from other humans. There are no rules that I can't talk about taboo things or I'm going to get arrested. Like,
Yeah.
in the US, at least, it's like I can really talk about whatever I want to talk about. And of course, with intentionality, like I want to be someone who helps people. That brings me lots of fulfillment and joy. But like, when I first started talking about like the traumas and the things that had happened to me, I think before that I had these rules for myself about I can't trauma dump. No one wants to hear it. This is too much. People are going to get uncomfortable. And the thing is, you never learn about other people's capacity, and you never shed people pleasing until you just stop doing the actions that you were doing, trying to keep everyone comfortable. You never learn, like, you never expand beyond. I know that's so, it can be so scary. It's like literally the scariest thing. But we have to realize that, like, the rules that we have for ourselves are not ones, like, a lot of them, they're not ones that are actually serving us and like the version of us that we're like wanting to be.
Yeah.
And we get to rewrite those rules. Like, we always get to rewrite them. And so now it's, yeah, I can fucking trauma dump as much as I want to on my podcast. I create spaces for myself where I'm like, okay, I can do this. I can ask people. I was thinking about, I went through a period where I was like asking people like how much money they made. And I remember my sister's like, I think you need to stop at that. But I was rewriting my own rules. It was a really important practice for me. And like, I feel like I found the middle ground with it, although I'm always like learning, where in order to connect with people and to connect with ourselves, we have to ask ourselves hard questions that are pretty taboo and confronting. And I used to have really bad social anxiety. I still do. But like the way that I have overcome it in a lot of ways is like by asking people genuine questions that are invasive sometimes or very invasive, but it allows people to take a moment and they can respond or not. They can tell me to fuck off or they can answer. I'm totally okay with any of it. I think it's so important to let ourselves speak on things that maybe society or stories you've picked up about society deems are like not appropriate or too taboo to talk about. Things like sexual assault.
Yeah.
Like, we rise together as women.
Yes.
It is not a taboo topic. Sexual assault is a pervasive, real thing that happens every day to women everywhere. And keeping it secret to try to keep people comfortable, like, obviously there's nuance to this, but I think that was the thing that cracked me open in like being able to really transcend and heal from a lot of trauma. It's like, I need to stop telling myself this is not okay to talk about.
When you first started talking about the rules, and the first thing that came to my head was a post that you had done about the fires. and like your thoughts about that. And I loved it because it was like, this is my initial thought. And then I was like, wow, that's a crappy thought. And like you put it out there and I was like, oh my gosh, all of us have these thoughts, but we don't put it out there. And I loved how I was like reading some of the comments, and it's funny how some people didn't take it the way that you wrote it. It was like, oh, defending the whatever it was. And it was like, no, she's like making this statement. We all have these thoughts initially, and it's okay because that's not like your values or beliefs, but that those are things that pop up. It's like when you see a person walking by your car in a parking lot, you lock your door. And the first thought is probably, is this person gonna rob me or something like that? But of course, you're not gonna be like, "Hey, I thought you were gonna rob me, but you seem cool." It's these things that we keep hidden inside of us. And I loved that post so much because I feel like that's like another these rules that we say you can't put like your real thoughts out there because people are gonna think that you're some sort of way, even though you're not. You're just like speaking on, "Hey, this was a crazy thought I had." And you know what? A ton of people think that. I literally had said something to my fiance about it, and he was like, "Oh, yeah, they're all that way." And I was like, "No, that's not the point of the post. That's not what it is." I was
Yeah.
like, "And they're not all in this tax bracket or whatever." I feel like it's good to know your thoughts and understand what's coming up, and you don't always have to react to that, but to learn to accept and still love yourself no matter what kind of crazy thoughts come up or what kind of crazy shit comes up. That's what I got from the post is, wow, you put something out there and still be like, yeah, that's not like where my thoughts or beliefs are. And I still like unconditionally love myself and I'm okay with this. And maybe I took the post different. That's how I like viewed it and for my own experience. And I just thought it's so refreshing to see somebody, especially online, just say some real things that go on in people's heads and life and still say, and I completely fully accept myself.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I love most about what you stand for and what you post and the way that you show up for people because I take that and I'm like, I hate to say you can do it, so I can do it because I don't like to put like people on hierarchies or anything, but there is something about seeing somebody moving through life in this way that really helps me and I think other people say, oh, it is okay for me to fully accept all those shitty parts of me. It's allowed. And like you said, there's these rules that we have. And when somebody comes in and like tries to break those rules or break that mold, it paves the way. We need people to constantly be doing that and saying, this is my truth and this is who I am, regardless if you like it or not, because then we see that and we're like, that's what I want to do. And that gives me a little bit of quote unquote permission to like do it myself, if that makes sense.
And that makes so much sense. Yeah. And you totally did pick up what I was putting down because you're my people. And I think about how 50% of people, give or take, are going to like you. 50% of people are not going to like you. And if you're not sharing what's authentically going on inside of you, 50% of people are not going to like you anyway. So it's a weird thing. I've been thinking about this a lot where it's like you could be I don't really like the word fake because I think of masking and it's deeply innocent to mask and I do it all the time. And but to really not be yourself and to be shaming yourself for the things you do truly think and who you are. And then you extend a version of yourself that's very tailored and perfected and to get people to like you. 50% people are still not going to like
Yeah.
you. So you're in like a fake version of you or this projected version of you that you think is acceptable and palatable, but 50% of people are still not going to like you. They're a different 50% of people. But that just makes me crack up because you really can't win if you're presenting an image of yourself. And I really feel so compassionate because I've spent so many years of my life masking and like I still do in so many ways. But yeah, when we present an image of ourselves to keep us safe, to keep other people comfortable, people are still not going to like you. There's nothing you can do about it. Literally nothing you can do about it. So yeah, I think of these rules, these kind of unwritten rules in business as a business owner, and you know this well. It's what is acceptable and appropriate to post so that people still think I'm an authority and hire me. Like, how much can I share without people thinking X, Y, and Z or not wanting to hire me? It's a whole thing in business.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I really, this is always a work in progress for me. It always gets me deeper connected to these different facets of me. That every time I share something that I feel triggered sharing, like something about me that I judge, I have a thought like the other day. I have these kinds of thoughts all the time. I have intrusive thoughts all the time. But like I was talking to my partner and I was like, the other day I had a thought that I just wanted to bop this old woman in the head as I like passed her on the street. And then it's like, and I like made a post about it, but I was like, I really felt like this is not okay to share. People are gonna think I'm violent. People are gonna think I'm crazy. And the post was about, I had that thought, but then I noticed that my next thought was like, I could do that, but I'm not someone who does that. So it's like, I don't identify as someone who would just bop a random woman on the head for no reason, like a chaos guy. But I was like, I don't identify as someone who would actually do that. And I'm like, wow, the stories we tell ourselves are so interesting. Because if I identified as someone who did do that, I probably would bop her on the head. And so that was like what that was about. But I think it's so funny. And yeah, it's like relieving when you see someone else talking about what goes on inside of them that is not societally acceptable and how they're processing through their human experience. Like it gives so much permission to be like, oh my God, that reminds me of this time that I thought that or did that and thought I was just like so bad. But here's this person out here talking about it in public.
Yeah.
That must mean that like I'm not so bad and that like other people have these experiences too. And I think that kind of permission is so healing. And I think we need so much more of that online because like it is just a fucking cesspool of people trying to be someone online. And I understand why we do that. It's
Yeah.
so we can be liked and so that we can feel safe. Like it's so deeply innocent. I really understand that. And also, I truly think like social media and just these ways that we can share with each other in person, social media, wherever, these are like the most ripe grounds for like spiritual transformation if you let it. Like you can talk about the worst things about you and feel the triggers that you feel. And you get to face the parts of you that think, I am not going to be safe if I reveal these parts of myself to the world. And then you are safe because you probably didn't die. And like, it just expands your capacity that much more.
Yeah. That when you talked about that old lady, it made me think of, but I felt like I had a reason, but then I was like, Felicia, that's not really a reason because now you're judging. But I was at this like little watering hole and we're like upstream from this family. And my friend that I went with is a photographer. So she's like staging everything and she's like telling us to pose a certain way. And I noticed this family just kept staring at us. And like me and my friend were in bikinis, and my other friend that was a photographer was in like a one piece. And she was having kind of some malfunctions with her swimsuit, so she kept messing with it, and I was like, are they judging us? Like, what obviously, like, my brain's judging them, right? And so I'm just like, "Why do they keep staring at us? What are they doing?" And I when we left, I didn't tell my friend why, although she's listening, but I was like, "You know what? I should have peed in that fucking water before I left, so it'd go downstream to those people that were swimming under us." And my friend was like, "Why?" And I didn't wanna say it because I felt like I was being judgy because I was like, "They were staring at us weird." I was like, "That's not a real reason because I have no idea what they're thinking." And so I was just like, "I don't know." And she was like, "You were trying to bless them with the golden shower?" And I was like, "Yeah, something like that." And then we just walked away, but I literally had that thought, I could just pee in this water and it would swim right down to you.
Okay. You know, what I love about that is it's the self-awareness piece of you have an awareness that you get triggered when people stare at you. You feel the discomfort of that. And there's a part of you that wants to rebel against the people causing the discomfort. And the discomfort is based on a story you're telling yourself about what they're thinking. Because they could be looking at you and be like, she's the most beautiful person I've ever seen. I love her so much. They could be feeling so much love for you. But
Yeah.
its stories are like, this is not safe. I'm not safe. So I need fucking revenge and I need retaliation, which is so human. Obviously, you thought that, but then it's like the self-awareness on top of that. And this is the thing when it comes to telling stories, and like narrative therapy is a really beautiful thing when it comes to trauma. And this feeds back to telling your story as like a sexual assault survivor and how therapeutic it is to just tell your story and rewrite rules about what you can say and talk about. But the thing I love about that is if you were to share that with the world, it would be so heartwarming and permission giving to someone like me or people who like resonate with you, because it's like you had the thought and the reaction to they must be judging me. You caught yourself doing that. A part of you was like, let's fucking rebel and give them a taste of their own medicine. But then it's like you also knew and had the awareness that this is like coming from my brain and I'm like creating this like situation for myself that is antagonistic between myself and people because of past memories of when this has happened before. Maybe someone said something to you or whatever in a circumstance that was like similar and it caused pain inside of you. So we're all people who have been hurt, and we all have those parts of us that want to hurt other people for hurting us because that's a defense. It's the fight response when it comes to the nervous system. We all have this. And I think it's so important to just really understand and really get into the fibers of your being that we all have victim parts that feel very helpless and like we don't know what the fuck we're doing and life is against us. We have persecutor parts that are judgmental and critical and think that we need to oppress other people so that we can be safe, right? We have rescuer parts that want to martyr ourselves and put other people before us so that we can get love. We think that's the way to do it, is if we put ourselves last and we just take care of everyone else and we save everyone, then I'll feel okay and I'll be a good person. We all have those parts. It's nothing to like, I was going to say it's nothing to feel shame about, but I acknowledge that we all feel shame about those parts because we think these parts are bad and wrong. I need to punish myself for having these parts. But the thing that's so like meta about when we punish ourselves for being a persecutor, for being critical and judgmental, we're just punishing the punisher. And then we're punishing the punisher who punishes. It just continues. There's no way out of it.
Yeah.
Punishing. And we literally just go around and around versus being that like that unshaming and that loving witness to the parts of us that are in pain. Like that part of you that was like, I want to fucking piss and I want the piss to
Oh.
it's like we can actually laugh about it because it becomes this like inner child part that really just wants to be like seen in her pain and doesn't feel like she's being seen in her pain. She feels like she's being judged. And like it becomes like this like and this goes back to like existential kink, when we really see the innocence in all of these parts of us, they become adorable. We're like, that is hilarious. Like, what a mad genius I am to think of that retaliation method. Like, that's hilarious. And like, those parts of us don't have to dictate our actions, but they can just be parts. And then we can get their needs met in all different ways. Like, we can be like, okay, part of me that wants to like pee and have the people swim in the pee. Like, what will you get from that when you imagine them just like swimming in your like, what do you think you'll feel? And it's all feels so powerful. And it's okay, cool. What does powers feel like?
Now I regret bringing this up. No, I'm
I
joking.
love that you did. I love that you did. It's such a good example because it's so relatable. And then we get to the core of that part of you might just want to feel powerful because she feels powerless when someone's looking at her and she imagines they're judging her. That is so valid. It's so valid. So it's okay. How can we get you the kind of power that you're seeking? Do you want to a really good thing that like I see this in like business and you as like a business owner and me as a business owner, this is a really beautiful way to take all that energy and create from it. is I think about how that there's someone, her name's Chelsea. She's the sabotage queen on Instagram. And she said a quote that I just love that was like, you're either creating or you're taking the edge off. And I often think when I'm just like being hateful or when I'm just fucking spinning in my shit or whatever, I'm like, I need to create. Because when I feel like that, when I just feel vengeful and hateful, I'm like, it's because I haven't fucking created something that has pushed the edges of my nervous system and made me get into a place of discomfort because that it just creates a channel. It's a channel of expression because otherwise that energy just gets congealed and then we feel shame and we're like, "Oh my god, I shouldn't feel that. That's crazy. That's so mean." But like, of course it is. It's latent energy that's not being moved.
Yeah.
And like when we move it, and this is what like somatic work is good for too, when we move it, it has an outlet and it can actually express itself in ways that can benefit you and even possibly the world doesn't stay stuck. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is definitely if I didn't have this conversation with you, I probably would have never thought of that, but I love instead I was just like, "Okay, this is your own bullshit." But I love how you redirected that because I'm definitely gonna think of that the next time this comes up is, "Okay, wait, I need to be in creation mode. What can I create from this?"
Yeah, because we just punish ourselves. And we learn that from our parents, which God bless them. But yeah, we learn that we need to punish the parts of us that aren't quote unquote good in order to get them to not act out what they want to
Mhm.
act out. Versus if you related to that part of you or any part of you that you deemed like bad or wrong from this lens of this is a deeply innocent part of me that I just like love so much. It's like I imagine it like a child that you just like love so much and you just think they're wonderful. And like anything that they do or say, there's not like an intention to be evil. It's like there's pain. That's what causes people to act quote unquote badly. It's like
Mhm.
there's pain. That is the source of quote unquote bad behavior. Like I believe that so strongly and like trauma, that's why like when we sever trauma cycles by doing this kind of work instead of perpetuating trauma, perpetuating pain, and I perpetuate pain in unconscious ways. Like when I become conscious, I'm like, wow, I am like doing the same shit that was done to me. Maybe it's in like through a different lens or facet, but I'm like, that is so interesting. I was like not aware of that at all. And yeah, this work, it ripples through generations, it ripples through the people that you know. Like just doing this work for yourself, I think it's the most profound work you could possibly do, this like unshaming and trauma work, because how you live and how you are, it cannot help but let that extend outward. Like when you're really doing this work and you start to see people through this lens of like their humanity and deep innocence, people can't help but be like drawn to that and like curious about it because it's so radical, but it hits a very honest, true part of them. That's, I think this feels good. And when we shame ourselves and we perpetuate the self criticism and judgment, we never get to access those like deeply innocent parts of us, which are all parts of us. We never get to relate to ourselves like that deeply innocent, hilarious, like beautiful spark of creation. It's just, yeah.
Thank you so much. I have one more question for you, but
I'm
for the person listening who feels like their story doesn't matter or they are too much or maybe they feel too broken, what would you want them to hear today?
yeah. I'm going to take this in like a interesting direction because I think it's important. It was an important inquiry for me is that when you believe the story that your story doesn't matter, you need to investigate what you're actually getting from that that's positive. Because that story that your story doesn't matter is protecting you in some way, shape, or form. Maybe that you're not consciously aware of. For example, if you believe your story doesn't matter, you're not going to tell your story. And then you don't have to face the potential perception of judgment from other people. So that story, my story doesn't matter, is protecting you from feeling the emotion of rejection, disappointment, fear, right? So I think like really starting there around like every part of me is trying to give me something. It's trying to give me a gift, but I'm not like aware of that gift because it's like unconscious. So on the surface, I have this thought that my story doesn't matter. But what is the gift that story is trying to give me? And can I receive that gift? Oh, thank you so much, self, for part of me that has that story that my story doesn't matter. Thank you so much for the gift of protecting me from feeling disappointment and rejection. And just like being with that part and being like, thank you so much, because that part does not get gratitude. It just like lingers in the background and you're like, shut up, my story doesn't matter. Or does it? I don't know. It's like we have this weird relationship where we're like walking around the part instead of going to the heart of it, being like, thank you so much, like looking at it in its face and telling it how grateful you are for how it's protecting you. And even like just that, starting to build a relationship with those parts of yourself that's just like thanking them, like going through each part that like is, wow, that's a terrible thought, or I'm being so judgmental. It's like, what is this part trying to give me? What's the gift inside of this part that I'm just not seeing because I'm just judging it and I'm just thinking it shouldn't be there?
Yes. Wow. That was really good. Matt Kern, he said, every situation in your life, and I love that you brought that up too, because it like popped in my head. But like any encounter that you have, looking at it as how is this a gift, no matter what it is, can change really that energy that you put behind everything. I have used that so many times in things,
Yeah.
and it really does start having your mind find that evidence of, oh, wait, how is this for me? And I think that can be like the start of waking up your awareness and having more consciousness around things that might be in the unconscious background.
Yeah, that's so beautiful because it's the difference between victim mentality and empowerment, right? It's the
Mhm.
victim says life is against me. And the empowered version of you says, how is this for me? And what is the gift here? And
Yes.
that's kind of like the ultimate flip change perspective of life. Because, yeah, when I think of trauma and like sexual assault, bringing it back around to that, I wouldn't wish any of that on my worst enemy.
Mm-mm.
And I have to find how I can use my experiences for me. Like that was a major switch to me, is and the gifts of the things I've experienced keep unfolding. Like it keeps unfolding because I have chosen to see the things that I have once deemed terrible and still deem terrible in some way. But I see how I have turned shit into gold, and we can all do that. It's hard
Yeah.
and it's a whole fucking journey, but it's the human journey. If you want to take that ride, like it is available.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Thank you for being here and reminding us that healing isn't this like linear journey,
Yeah.
and it's not always what the world expects it to look like. And there's no shame in having that sensitivity. There's no shame in your story. And there's no part of you that's really broken. We're all just on this human journey and this ride, and really diving deep in loving all of those parts, and maybe sometimes even getting a giggle out of some of those parts that maybe we wouldn't have before.
Often getting a giggle.
Yes. Yes, it can, like, it really move you in a trajectory of your life that you might not even realize is possible. So, thank you so
Yeah.
much for being on. I could talk to you for freaking hours. You're amazing, and we'll have all of your links to all of your things. Anybody that's watching needs to definitely, follow, subscribe, do all the things, listen to your podcast, and I'll have all that in the show notes.
Yay. Thank you so much. This is so good.
Yes, thank you. If you enjoyed this podcast, please make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review so that we can connect with more people to develop our mind, body, and spirit.